Welcome to the Leadership Exposé podcast. This podcast is for purpose-driven leaders at diverse levels and organizations around the world who are seeking to scale and transform their leadership, to level up their business, and to create an impact in the lives of people all around them. Business and boardroom topics, trends, innovation, transformation, and the intersection with leadership is the focus. We enable success. I'm your host, Stephen Paul. In this episode, I'm pleased to host the co-founder and chief sales officer of Vika Living. Vika Living makes rapidly deployable, designed and feature-packed housing units and is the best micro-housing on the market that solve for a $30 billion a year industry gap. Jeff is a sales leader and entrepreneur, and he loves advising founders and impactful nonprofits whilst also enabling the best of company culture and humanitarian needs. We will learn about Jeff, about the roles that he holds amongst this, and all the initiatives that he's leading and how companies can address their growth and culture, amongst other things. Jeff, welcome. How are you doing today?
That's a great intro. Thank you very much, by the way. That's a great way to start. I'm honored. I'm doing well, and it's great to be here and be a part of this podcast. Thank you.
Wonderful. We just before the podcast, we were exchanging where we're based. I'm based here in London, UK. Tell us, for the audience purposes, where you're based. I know you're based in the US, but where?
Sure. Yeah. I live and work remotely out of Charleston, South Carolina, which is a beautiful, wonderful place. If you've never been, I suggest visiting.
I haven't been. I haven't been to Carolina. I've been to several parts of the US, but I'm from Toronto, as I told you before. But I used to travel quite a lot to the US,
Yeah.
but never to Carolina. Lots of great things that I've heard of, and I know quite a few people from there as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. And really, I had not been here until about 6 years ago. I'd always, heard about Charleston, and about 6 years ago, I was here on a business trip, fell in love with it. And my wife and I and our family, we moved here not long after, and we've been here ever since.
Yeah, and it's all history, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, wonderful. So keen to hear about you, Jeff, and your journey as a leader, your personal journey, and how that intersects with your professional journey. Tell us your pivotal points as well along the way.
Sure. For me, I had the privilege of growing up in a family of, basically risk takers, people who were not afraid to be entrepreneurs, to break out on their own, to try something, give it their all. And, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but both of those outcomes are just enormous value to the people who are going through it. So I grew up seeing that firsthand, it in some cases. I mean, starting to work when I was probably 10, 11 years old, somewhere right around there, and chipping in with family businesses and things like that, and seeing things firsthand, failures and success. And like I said, both are equally important. And so when I was not afraid to try something new. And so I actually started my first business right out of college, and did that for, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years. Not a huge success, but definitely a great learning experience. And then I've had several other companies along the way that I've started, and I've had the great gift of being able to be an entrepreneur and have that, initial one-person company, then grow it to your next employee, and then so on and so on. But then also work for a really large corporation and work for mid-sized businesses. And so where I'm at today in my career, everything in my past is prologue and is just a culmination of great experience that I feel has armed me really well to be successful and impactful for my own company and others today, having all of those cumulative experiences kind of lead me to where I am right now. So I wouldn't change any of it, even the ones that didn't work out very well. I wouldn't change a bit of it, because it's so great to be able to learn and pull from those experiences and apply it in a practical way today, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really keen to hear about, some of those lessons that you've learned. But my takeaway from what you were just describing is, you grew up in that setting of risk takers, entrepreneurs, and you've worked in in companies that you were the leader by yourself, but also medium-sized companies and established companies where you were, bringing in entrepreneurial approaches or being an entrepreneur and building companies. Were there any scary moments during those periods?
Yeah, there was one particular company. I won't say their name. I was brought in a leadership role to help, along with a few other people, create a brand new division within this rapidly growing company. And it was a great opportunity for me. And I really enjoyed it and worked with some fantastic people. There was a scary moment when that company, my team started recognizing that they were growing way too fast. And our division was successful. And what we were doing was sound, solid strategy, and we were executing and we were generating profit. We were doing well. And we were just kind of scratching the surface of the potential of what we could be doing. The other divisions in the company were scaling so fast, it was getting out of control. And we started recognizing the danger signs of that. And it was scary when we started seeing things outside of our department start crumbling, because we knew, okay, at some point this is going to impact us. And sure enough, there was that moment where, okay, the company grew way too fast and we're going to have to start laying people off. And that's scary, because you look around and you feel responsible for all of these people on your team and their livelihoods and their families. And when you're in that situation where layoffs are happening, that's tough. And that's a moment where, you still have to be a leader. You still have to do, what you can to help your team and be responsible to your company. And that was a tough moment in my career going through that, but it was a great learning experience. And that propelled me forward into kind of a whole new era of my career and my professional life, where I decided to take a little bit more control over the direction that I would go and really lean into the entrepreneur side of my professional life and start my own businesses and make sure that I could have a little bit more impact and say in the direction of things, rather than be, a leader amongst a 2,000 person, company where it's going in 17 different directions.
Yeah. So with that wisdom and experience in mind, where's your focus these days?
Focus these days, I have kind of two sides, really. I have a philanthropic side of my life that will always be there, and I'm happy to touch on that. And in some sense, they all kind of inform each other and help each other. But the professional side of things, it's all about Vika Living right now. And Vika Living is a company I'm co-founder of, and we launched a little over a year ago. And as you mentioned in the intro, we're building micro housing, and it's an approach that is unique. It's something new for the industry, and it's really exciting to be a part of. And I feel like we are just right on the cusp of doing some extraordinary things, helping a lot of people. And I get really excited about when I see advances in any industry, but in particular, real estate and anything, just related to housing, because I have a long background and history there as well. So yeah, Vika Living is what I'm focused on wholeheartedly right now. And it's a thrill to be a part of that.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I'm really curious, because
yeah.
I was hearing about it, and I was reading a little bit about it, but I'd really be keen.
Sure. So most everyone now has heard of, tiny homes, for example. They're becoming more and more popular globally, it's just all over the place. And so, if you have a typical tiny home, which is supposed to be less expensive, it's supposed to be the, utilization of a smaller amount of space, yet still feel comfortable, cozy, all of those things. It's a fantastic concept. And similar to tiny home, you hear the terms of ADUs and things like that. Well, what we see in the marketplace on, say, the commercial side of things, so you have a camping industry, a glamping industry, which is supposed to be a form of like luxury-based camping, and even hoteliers, boutique operations, resorts, things like that. So all in that space, or even large-scale Airbnb type operations, you see people who essentially are renting out units on a nightly basis, and the units that they're renting out fall into really two broad spectrums. On one end, you have basically the canvas topped elements like the tents and yurts and things like that people have seen and heard of for decades. They've been around forever, and there have been some advancements on that side, but it's still a tent. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you would have that tiny home element, which are great. But what we discovered is over the last several years, my co-founder and I, who also has a background in housing, there was really nobody capturing that middle ground where you could have something that would be less expensive than a tiny home, yet have all of the amenities and necessities that you need in a home, but be more operable than, say, a tent, even regardless of its luxury. You needed something for all four seasons. And what the feedback we kept hearing over and over again at previous stops were, we want a restroom, we want a shower, we want a kitchen, we want all these things, and it needs to be a hard top because it needs to accommodate all four seasons. So Scott and I, my co-founder, thankfully he is a brilliant engineer, and he came up with this incredible design for Vika, what we have on the market right now. And so what we've done is we have basically focused on that middle ground. So our unit answers all of the wish list of the people, what they're looking for. It's a hard top, it's beautiful, it has the restroom, shower, bed, furniture, all these things, the kitchen, even it comes with a deck, HVAC, all of it. So all of those necessities are built in. It can have the ability to go off grid, which is important to people, and then the whole green element, which is fantastic. But it comes in at about a fourth the cost of a typical ADU. So depending on how it's configured, right now it's about 40 to 50,000, including delivery fees. So that's a far cry better than, say, spending 150,000 on a tiny home, plus having to do permanent foundations and renting cranes and all these heavy machinery. So we focused on that. But at the same time, and this is where we get really passionate about it, we knew that we were building something that could help a lot of people. And why not take that exact same approach and the exact same ingenuity and all the feature comforts and all these things and apply it to a humanitarian application. And so if you think disaster relief, emergency shelters and transitional housing, things like that, we're doing that simultaneous. So the businesses that are purchasing these to rent out on a nightly basis, beautiful fit. There's a great business persona there. But then on the humanitarian side, we get to help cities, NGOs, all these groups that are in desperate need of housing solutions for that emergency shelter and temporary transitional space. So we're happy to step into that and put our focus there. So that's what we're focusing on right now. And we are just now coming to market. It's a really fun time for us.
Amazing. I'm excited just hearing all of this.
Yeah, it's fun. We get really fired up about it, and we're blessed to be in the situation that we're in. And this, Vika Living, it's another example of something I touched on before, where it's kind of a culmination of our collective experiences to get us to this point where we are a little over a year old as a company, but we were able to accelerate our growth and our process because we were able to learn from prior experiences, leverage that experience into, creating a process that is more efficient, that works, that focuses on the needs that are out there and all of that. So we were able to do it far more efficiently, which gets us to this point where we can help people sooner.
Yeah. So Jeff, just hearing all of this, and you said you're a year in. It's a couple of questions. Yeah. So, are you thinking about going global, or is it national?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we will absolutely be international. We've already had conversations with five or six different groups in 5 or 6 different countries. And what's also been interesting about that is a few of those have followed up and said, if you get to the point where you would entertain this conversation, we'd also like to talk to you about, being an extension of Vika Living and opening up, manufacturing facilities here because we want so much of it. And that was not something that we had anticipated, originally, but it definitely highlights that there is a need globally, not just in the US, which we had, assumed going into it. So we have every intention of being international. We're probably, at some point in 2023, we'll probably start shipping internationally, though we don't know exactly when that'll be yet.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I mean, you've talked about the design, as in, you've talked about the product being the home or the house, and
Sure.
the design of it, and so forth. But behind all of that is a leader, and that's you, and your partners as well.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about how you, and assuming you've got a team, or if you don't, or how you're actually bringing all these people within your ecosystem to enable your vision.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this has been true at prior stops as well. I think overall there's a focus that you need to have if you're going to be the leader of a company. To me, it always starts with, what is the company's mission? What is our vision? What are we trying to accomplish, and how do we want to accomplish that? Because that then informs the culture of your company, which I think is paramount. If you have a toxic culture, if you're not even tapping into the full potential of your culture, then you're never going to, exceed expectations or realize a full potential. So you have to spend time and make the effort to decide, what kind of team are we going to be? And that's truly how you need to look at it, that you are a team. Sure, you have a leadership role, and you have responsibilities, great responsibilities that come with that, and those should never be ignored or diminished. But you have to operate as a team. The person that is brand new and working at an entry-level position is just as important as what the CEO is doing. And when you have that approach, and when you place that type of value, on your people, it goes a long way. And I've seen examples, fortunately, in my career, I've been a part of that, where it just works beautifully, and it when you're in it and you see the results of it. And I've been a part of a company where that wasn't the case, and I watched that company, fall apart, and it's a shame, because it impacted thousands of people, and they could have been a multi-billion-dollar organization, but they failed at the culture aspect. They failed, across the board in leadership. So that's how it starts. And so when you are onboarding new hires, it's important to have those conversations about outlining, what are the core values of your company? What are the expectations? Here's what we expect of ourselves. Here's what we expect of you. And people, when they have that set of expectations outlined up front, well, then that can eliminate, future frustrations, because there are no surprises. But then the other part of it is that you have to continue to foster that and cultivate, that environment and that culture, and stay with it. And thankfully, when you have leaders, anybody that's in a leadership position that really buys into that, and they believe it, and they're passionate about it, and they live it, well, then it's not a hard task. It's just second nature, it becomes natural. And then the work becomes far more enjoyable, and the results end up speaking for themselves. Because in my experience, when that happens, profits go up, morale is up, everybody wins. So why wouldn't you do it this way?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely subscribe to that philosophy, and I actually see that with many of the companies that I work with. And I also had my own set of experiences as well. And, you were describing about setting that vision, that mission, aligned values. But there was also certain things that you mentioned around, fostering the culture. And fostering the culture, in my view, is also about, the habits and that rhythm, and, that ways of working and communicating at all times, because I find and it's refreshing, Jeff, to be speaking with you when you speak about leadership and how you engage with your team as well. Many leaders tend to be so focused on the technical aspect, and it's very important. Yeah, you talk about strategy, for example, you talk about product, you talk about whether it's what's a hardcore product or whether it's a service or a software, whatever it is, but really focused on that as opposed to the people side of things, which then automatically starts generating what you need later on. Do you
Right.
do you find that as a critical component?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
If you do not have the people, if you're not investing in your people, I just don't see, I've never experienced it, and I don't see, maybe just a handful of examples of that being a successful outcome. And there's something that somebody said to me a long time ago, and I think this also highlights a healthy culture in a company. Leadership in a leadership role is not in a title.
Mm.
And so that's another thing that I found early in my career. I naturally, I did not have a, typical on one stop early on in my career. I didn't have a typical, title that would, give me that automatic recognition of, oh, that's a leader. But I conducted myself in a way that how I always have, where I just take ownership of my work and I try to help all the people around me, just because I enjoy that. I like seeing people, reach their potential, and I gravitate towards helping others. And I think that's because that's how I was raised, and that's the examples that I was given over and over as a child. So when I did that, I was told, wow, people were responding. Like all the people in my department were responding, and they were coming to me with their issues versus going to, the EVP or, whoever technically they were supposed to go to. And people recognized that. And so I had the support and the camaraderie and the loyalty, basically, of all of these people within this company, even though I didn't have the title. And so I started learning these lessons early on, that it's so important you can be a leader and you can be a role model and you can have a massive impact in a company, regardless of what your title is. And I think when you allow that in an organization and not feel threatened by that, I mean, everybody wins. Like if you see somebody that's thriving in their role and they're doing more, achieving more than what their job description outlines, good for them and good for your company. There's your next promotion. And so I've always taken that philosophy of let's promote from within if we can. If there's an opportunity to create a new position or an opportunity of growth, I want to look at the team that I already have first, and if possible, promote from within that group, and then continue, to cheer them on and support them and give those opportunities. I love that stuff.
Yeah, excellent. Let's talk a little bit briefly about the macro trends that's happening here. We know we've got our economic situation, our shocks in the economy, and we're coming in and out of the pandemic. It's not completely gone out. But what are you seeing as challenging in the business world or in your industry that's influenced by these macro challenges, economy?
Yeah, there are a few key components to that. So let's just say in multiple industries, because I'm also, I advise a few other companies outside of mine, which I really enjoy because I like giving back, and it gives me an opportunity to get to know some really extraordinary people and see perspectives from multiple industries. From that role, from that perspective, and seeing multiple industries, one thing that the pandemic, I think, has impacted more than anything else is workforce culture and workforce location, and those are not mutually exclusive. So remote working obviously has really grown over the last few years because of the pandemic. Somebody like myself, I was working remotely prior to that, so I had already figured out my rhythms and routines and how to make that work. But a lot of companies right now are facing some hardship in some ways and some challenges in other ways, because how do they balance these newfound obstacles of half my workforce or more are working from their homes. A lot of people are really enjoying that, and I completely understand. But at the same time, as a corporation, as a company, small, medium, or large, you have to balance that with productivity, and a lot of them are figuring it out and doing very well. And then how do you continue to cultivate great relationships and team chemistry and that company culture if people aren't together? And so that's a challenge that I'm seeing. That's been really interesting. In my industry, on the hardware side of things, what we're seeing is probably the largest impact would be on cost of goods, of course, which everyone is experiencing. Even from 6 months ago, the cost of our parts that we have to use as we're building our units have gone up. I don't think there's a single component of what we do that has not seen an increase in price. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, we have great relationships with our vendors, and so we've been able to minimize, how that impacts our pricing. But still, it's something that we face. The other thing that companies are facing right now in the economy, if you are in that startup, if you're a capital, based company, it's harder to fundraise right now than it was even a few months ago, because people are concerned about the inflation. The VCs are concerned about, what's happening with the global economy. Rightfully so, of course, but investment dollars are not dried up, but slowing down. And so that capital is harder to come by today than it was before. And that's a great challenge for a lot of companies.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm hearing, you've got a full suite of business commitments. So Jeff, tell us how, what does a day in the life of Jeff look like, morning to evening?
Yeah, I think one of the things that helps keep me balanced and focused, because for me, I'm a creature of habit. So I have to have a daily, routine, and there's a certain structure around all of my days. Probably more than anything that helps me stay focused and in a routine, and that is the fact that I have a wife and 2 young kids at home that they're school aged, and so we have already naturally routines of the day. And so I start a little before 6 a.m. and the morning hours I really enjoy because I'm with my daughters. I'm helping them get ready for school and driving them to school. And then, and I've got that time with them and my wife, which is great. And it's uninterrupted. But then that also allows me to get an early start on my work day. And that begins with typically the first part of the day. I'm doing a lot of either research or prep for something big that is coming up. I basically use that as kind of my me time for work. My calendar is almost always blocked off in those morning hours because I set that aside for that. And then with my partner and my co-founder in Vika Living, he lives and works in Los Angeles, where our headquarters and factory are. And so he's 3 hours earlier than me on the time zone. And so he starts his day with a phone call with me where we have a daily meeting, which I think is great for any team that's doing that. You have to have those meetings, those benchmarks to kind of keep you on track. And then from there, a lot of my day is spent in conversation with people who are interested in purchasing Vika, which is great. I love the opportunity. I get to speak to people from all over the world. Right now, it's mostly in the US, but a lot of international calls coming in and hearing about how people want to use those units and what they're going to do. I'd mentioned before, I advise a few other companies that typically I spend a few hours a week, doing that, but those are fun. Those are great conversations. And I really love speaking into whatever their needs are and helping them figure out, what needs to happen next and problem solve and troubleshoot stuff. That's really enjoyable. And then I do a lot of philanthropic work, primarily in the anti-trafficking and modern day slavery spaces. And that's been something I've been a part of for many years and I'm very passionate about. And so from time to time, if certain events come up, I'm meeting with various congressmen and senators, supporting legislative efforts to combat that from a U.S. perspective. And those are fun projects to work on. But there's a certain fluidity to my day, depending on what the need is. But that overall structure, starting early in the morning, family time, then getting busy with work. And then some days I'm working till 9 p.m. Some days I'm not. And then sometimes I'm working on weekends. Sometimes I'm not. It just depends on where the need is. But if you are starting a company, you have to have that level of commitment. You have to be able to put in that time. And I try to keep Sundays completely blocked off for my family and and really make the most of it there. But yeah, that's, you have to have flexible hours.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just going to ask, I mean, it's quite a lot, but I heard commitment, but there's also a level of conscious organization of how you're managing your day, your week.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does tend to go off the rails with many business leaders because they focus on one thing and really try to get a lot out of it. And depending on the time and phase that they're in, it might be needed, but it's important to have that balance as much as possible.
Yeah,
Balance.
exactly, as much as possible. And then I find that prioritizing, the needs of everything, that's important. And you have to, or at least for me anyway, I've gotten much better at that throughout my career, and especially over the last 5 or 6 years or so. And I think that has really been accelerated by being a part of a few different startup companies. And when you are a leader in a startup, you inevitably have the responsibilities of 15 different jobs. And so you're doing a lot of different things, but learning how to prioritize things in a way in which it supports your strategy. And if you're prioritizing in a way where, okay, does this meeting get me to this goal faster, or does it get me there slower? And if it's not getting you there faster, well, then maybe it needs to get moved back in your schedule a little bit. And so if you start looking at things through that lens, but it's very important that you take time for yourself and for your family. And so, for me, I have a family, and so I have to also pay attention to that, of course. But anyone that has a family and they're a leader in a company, you have to understand that your family, in a way, is a part of that. And so, if you're early on in a company, in a startup, they are sacrificing just as much as you are, and they are a part of it. And it's good to have that family time and that time to just kind of decompress. And so I always advise people, and I remind myself of this, take time to do something that you love. Take time to just, breathe and just be, meditate, exercise, pray, whatever it is that really centers you and gives you calm and gives you focus. Don't ever lose that. And you have to sometimes schedule that. And if you feel like that's what you need to do to make it happen, well, that's what you do then. But be intentional about it, and it'll go a long way.
Yeah. Excellent. Jeff, we're coming to a close very shortly. Any closing messages or a challenge to other leaders that you want to give here?
I would say what energizes me the most about leaders in today's business world, because I feel like there are so many changes that are evolving right now in business in general, and there's just globally with all of the issues that all of our communities and cultures are facing. There's an opportunity for business and business leaders to step into some of these problems and really affect change and have a meaningful impact on things. And I feel like too often for-profit businesses overlook how much of a positive impact they can have on their communities, yet still be for-profit businesses. And so I just encourage people to find areas in which they can do some good and help others, and support your teams, and make sure that the team that you are working with, that you're supporting them, that you're focusing on that, and then that'll create positive energy and a better outcome. And just don't be afraid to give back and give more of yourself to other people, and it'll be the most rewarding thing that you can do in a given day.
Yeah, wonderful, powerful challenge to leaders and companies. Thank you very much, Jeff, for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sharing your journey and all your insights. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
That was a pleasure. I really appreciate your podcast and your efforts in doing all of this, and all of the people that you bring on. It's a great opportunity to hear, varying perspectives from all over the world. And I just think that's fantastic.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, folks, thank you for listening in, and stay tuned for our next episode on the chairperson of a startup board and what it means to be on a board in a startup company. Stay tuned. Hey, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You're now seeing this part of the video also because you consume some of my content, insights, and teachings. Maybe you've been to my LinkedIn page or website or seen other social media ads or listened to my podcast. I'm Stephen Paul, a business and transformational executive coach, strategic advisor, leader, and board member. I've been in diverse roles, corporate executive, entrepreneur, and worked with businesses and firms of all sizes, built and launched businesses, created high-impact boards, and so forth in 4 continents. I get it. I've been there, done that, but what is different is I bring a unique perspective and a playbook. I've helped 100+ business leaders just like you to scale and align their leadership top teams, the board, and overall business for growth. Leaders like Ivana from medium-sized company in the EU who grew 150% and expanded globally in under 5 months. After she started to work with me over facilitated sessions in an initial 3 days, I helped fine-tune their strategy and align their leadership team and board to be a cohesive driving force to achieve their dreams and outcomes. I want to teach you the same thing and more on how to scale and align your leadership team and board so you can increase your business growth and value. Get clarity on what is the next right strategy for you. There are multiple ways we can work with you. Number 1, click the link for a free, non-obligatory 60-minute initial strategic session. Let's get a feel for your dreams, your vision, your challenges, and let me convert that into a route map for you where we can co-develop and co-pilot. Number 2, enroll in an innovative and intuitive digital online course that I have created to help you transform. It's called Unshakable Resilience. It is the ultimate program for individuals and business leaders like you who want to be equipped at a personal and professional level to respond to any form of challenges or in crisis situations and take on opportunities with grit, resilience, and build a mindset of success. In essence, you want to be unshakable, thrive in crisis, take on opportunities in the face of adversity, and build a success mindset. So, click the link below to learn more on how I can personally help you individually and your firm to scale and align your leadership team and business and pivot in a transformational way. And for you to experience this, whatever the challenge you're facing, get in touch with me. Let's discuss, and I will share my insight rapidly to enable your transformation. Click the links below.